They say Hollywood's brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. In the Golden Age, a single scandal could destroy a career or make a legend. But what happens when the world's most beloved stars are caught at the center of controversy? From courtroom dramas to secrets hidden behind studio gates, these moments redefined fame and infamy. Which truth sent shockwaves through the silver screen? And which secret still lingers in the echoes of Tinseltown? Sometimes, the story you remember isn't the whole story at all. First, Mae West. Mae West's name is synonymous with controversy, but nothing defined her more than the scandal that erupted over her Broadway play Sex in 1927. At a time when polite society demanded demure women and clean entertainment, Mae strode onto the stage and threw all those rules out the window. She wrote, produced, and starred in Sex, a play so brazen in its depiction of desire, prostitution, and female autonomy that it drew packed houses and the ire of New York's moral guardians. The authorities were quick to act. Police raided the theater and hauled Mae, along with her cast, off to jail. She spent 8 days locked up, using her time behind bars to gather stories for future scripts, and famously quipping that the experience was great for publicity. When Mae arrived in Hollywood, she brought her scandalous reputation with her, refusing to tone down her act for the cameras. The film industry, desperate to attract audiences during the Depression, saw in Mae a risk worth taking. Her debut in She Done Him Wrong was filled with double entendres, winks, and nods that skirted the censors. Studio heads panicked, but the public couldn't get enough. The film's wild success practically saved Paramount from bankruptcy. Mae West's sex scandal wasn't just about one play or one woman's audacity. It marked a turning point for Hollywood. She pushed the limits of what could be shown, said, and suggested on screen, paving the way for decades of bolder, more complex female characters. The controversy followed her for years, but so did the admiration. Mae proved that controversy wasn't just a hurdle. It could be a ladder to legendary status. Second, Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe, Fatty Arbuckle was at the top of the comedy world in 1921, one of the highest-paid stars in the business, beloved by millions for his slapstick genius. But everything changed over Labor Day weekend, when Arbuckle found himself at the center of a scandal so sensational it nearly took Hollywood down with him. During a wild party at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel, a young actress named Virginia Rapp fell ill and died days later. Arbuckle was accused of rape and manslaughter. The press had a field day, painting him as the symbol of Hollywood's supposed moral decay. 3 trials followed, each more lurid than the last. Witnesses contradicted each other, evidence was mishandled, and public outrage exploded. Though Arbuckle was acquitted, his third jury issued a rare public apology for the ordeal. But his career was over. The studios dropped him, his films were pulled from theaters, and his name became shorthand for celebrity scandal. But the damage didn't stop with Arbuckle. The scandal triggered a moral panic, leading to the formation of the Hays Office, Hollywood's first self-censorship board. Studios scrambled to clean up their act, blacklisting anyone with a whiff of controversy. Arbuckle tried to return under a pseudonym, but he never regained his former glory. The real tragedy was how the incident overshadowed any facts, reducing a comic genius to a cautionary tale about fame, excess, and America's hunger for gossip. Fatty Arbuckle's downfall remains one of Hollywood's darkest cautionary tales, a stark reminder of how quickly fame can turn, and how one scandal can leave a mark that never fades. 3. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman was the picture of European grace, beloved in America for her roles in Casablanca and Notorious, the embodiment of romantic longing and purity. But in 1949, Bergman's life took a turn that would spark a firestorm of moral outrage, not just in Hollywood, but across the United States. While filming in Italy, Bergman fell passionately in love with director Roberto Rossellini, while both were married to other people. She became pregnant, and the press pounced on the scandal, branding her an adulteress and a homewrecker. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. In a notorious moment, Bergman was denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate as a powerful influence for evil, a stunning fall from grace for the star who once played saints on screen. Studios severed contracts, theaters refused to show her films, and her American career came to a screeching halt. Exiled by Hollywood, Bergman moved to Italy and married Rossellini, making films that defied convention but further scandalized the mainstream press. Yet, Bergman refused to grovel or hide. Her boldness, her refusal to apologize for loving whom she loved, became a new kind of statement. Years later, Hollywood came calling again, and she returned triumphantly, even winning another Oscar for Anastasia. But the scar of her public shaming never completely faded. Bergman's ordeal was a lesson in how quickly Hollywood could turn on its brightest stars, and how a woman's choices, especially about love and motherhood, could spark outrage far beyond the screen. Charlie Chaplin, the iconic little tramp, was also one of the most polarizing figures in Hollywood history, not just for his politics, but for a private life that repeatedly blew up in public. By the late 1930s and early 40s, Chaplin's relationships with much younger women were attracting intense scrutiny. He married Una O'Neill when she was just 18, and he was 54, but it was his earlier entanglements that drew the most fire: paternity suits, public feuds with ex-wives, and tabloid headlines that painted him as a libertine. Things reached a breaking point in 1943 when aspiring actress Joan Barry filed a paternity suit against Chaplin, claiming he was the father of her child. The ensuing trial was a media circus, with sordid details splashed across the nation's front pages. Chaplin was cleared by blood tests, which were not yet admissible in court, but the damage was done. To many, he became the face of Hollywood's moral decline. As if that weren't enough, Chaplin's political views, outspoken leftist sympathies, and criticism of U.S. policy put him in the crosshairs during the Red Scare. J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI kept thick files on him, and in 1952, as Chaplin sailed to London for a film premiere, the U.S. government revoked his re-entry visa. Effectively exiled, Chaplin never made another American film. His genius as a filmmaker and comedian is unquestioned. But Charlie Chaplin's most controversial moments are a reminder of how even icons are vulnerable when private lives become public battlegrounds, and how, in Golden Age Hollywood, genius and scandal were never far apart. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's career was already a magnet for gossip columns, but nothing compared to the firestorm that erupted in 1958, when a violent encounter in her Beverly Hills home ended with the death of Johnny Stompanato, her lover and a notorious gangster. The story had everything: movie star glamour, organized crime, a daughter thrust into the spotlight, and a level of tragedy that seemed ripped from a film noir script. After a heated argument between Turner and Stompanato, her 14-year-old daughter Cheryl Crane intervened, stabbing Stompanato to death. The trial was sensational, with the public hanging on every revelation and rumor. The coroner's inquest ruled Cheryl acted in self-defense to protect her mother, but the public's imagination was ignited. Questions swirled about the true nature of Turner's relationship with Stompanato, rumors of abuse and blackmail, and whether Hollywood's elite played by their own set of rules. Turner herself was called to the witness stand, her image dissected by the media in a way no studio could control. The scandal, far from destroying her, transformed Turner's reputation. She became an emblem of the modern American woman, flawed, vulnerable, and willing to fight for her child. For years afterwards, Lana Turner's name was inseparable from that moment of violence, overshadowing her filmography and personal triumphs. Yet, the scandal also cemented her place in Hollywood legend. The case remains one of the most infamous intersections of crime and celebrity, a reminder of how quickly the veneer of glamour can be shattered exposing the raw, sometimes tragic, reality beneath. Turner survived the scandal and went on to even greater success. But the world would never look at her quite the same way again. Joan Crawford. For decades, Joan Crawford reigned as one of Hollywood's most powerful leading ladies, a symbol of strength, resilience, and dazzling ambition. But in 1978, a year after her death, her adopted daughter, Christina, published Mommy Dearest, a memoir that would forever change the world's view of the star. The book's allegations were shocking. Scenes of physical and emotional abuse, bizarre punishments, and a portrait of a mother obsessed with control and image at any cost. Suddenly, the woman who had triumphed over poverty and sexism to become a movie icon was recast as Hollywood's ultimate villain. The controversy exploded. The memoir shot to the top of bestseller lists, and the 1981 film adaptation turned "no wire hangers" into a cultural catchphrase. Friends and fans were divided. Some insisted Christina exaggerated or fabricated, while others whispered that the star's perfectionism masked darker truths. Studios and biographers scrambled to defend or reassess her legacy, but nothing could fully erase the new, infamous image of Joan Crawford as the monstrous mother. Joan's reputation became a battleground. Was she the misunderstood product of a ruthless industry, or a genuine tyrant behind closed doors? The truth may never be clear, but the scandal remains one of the most enduring in Hollywood history. Even as scholars re-examine her achievements, Crawford's story is a chilling reminder of how fame can warp personal lives, and how legacies, good or bad, are often decided long after the final curtain falls. For better or worse, Mommy Dearest ensured Joan Crawford's name would live on in controversy. Claraba Bose. Claraba Bose defined 1920s Hollywood. Her wild charisma, sensuality, and the effortless way she lit up the screen earned her the nickname the It Girl. But behind the glittering image, Bose's life was a magnet for scandal, and in 1931, her world nearly collapsed under the weight of tabloid rumors, betrayal, and relentless public scrutiny. That year, a bitter former secretary sold a series of lurid stories to the press, accusing Bose of orgies, drunken binges, gambling debts, affairs with both men and women, and even bestiality, a barrage of lies and half-truths that hit like a tidal wave. In an era before celebrities had teams of PR defenders, Bose was left to face the onslaught almost alone. The headlines were devastating, and so was the public's fascination. Although most of the allegations were debunked in court, the damage was done. Studios distanced themselves, and Bose, exhausted by years of personal attacks and betrayal by those closest to her, including family, retreated from Hollywood at the height of her fame. The scandal not only revealed the cruelty of the gossip industry, but also exposed how vulnerable stars could be to the whims of the press and personal vendettas. Claraba Bose's reputation never fully recovered, even as later generations came to recognize her as a trailblazer for women in film. Her story is a cautionary tale about the price of fame, the dangers of misplaced trust, and how quickly a public darling could become a pariah. Despite everything, Claraba Bose's legend endures, a reminder that sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. Errol Flynn. If Errol Flynn's on-screen persona was that of the dashing, mischievous swashbuckler, his off-screen life proved even more controversial. In 1942, at the height of his fame, Flynn was accused of statutory rape by two underage girls. The charges stunned Hollywood, launching a sensational trial that captured front-page headlines across America. Flynn, known for his charm and reckless behavior, became the embodiment of Hollywood's excesses, his every move scrutinized and his reputation on the line. The trial was pure spectacle. Both the prosecution and defense exploited the star's image, painting him alternately as a predator and a victim of gold diggers seeking fame or a payoff. The public was riveted, with fans divided, some steadfast in their support, others convinced of his guilt. Ultimately, Flynn was acquitted, but the bad boy label stuck for life. Even as studios scrambled to rehabilitate his image, tales of his hard-drinking, womanizing ways became part of Hollywood lore. The controversy didn't end with the verdict. Flynn continued to court scandal with his exploits, feeding the press stories of wild parties, affairs, and brushes with the law. For some, his acquittal was proof of a system that protected stars at all costs. For others, it was a testament to his irresistible charisma. Either way, the trial and its aftermath defined Flynn's legacy, coloring every role and interview to come. Errol Flynn's story is a reminder of how closely stardom and scandal can intertwine, and how, in Hollywood, sometimes the line between hero and villain is thinner than a sword's edge. Judy Garland. Judy Garland's rise from child star to Hollywood legend is the stuff of dreams and nightmares. Immortalized as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, Garland's talent was unquestionable, but her off-screen life became a cautionary tale about the costs of fame. From a young age, Garland was subjected to the ruthless demands of MGM Studios. Executives placed her on a regimen of amphetamines to keep her working, then sleeping pills to ensure she'd rest, a cycle that fueled a lifelong battle with addiction. The pressure to maintain a certain weight and image led to eating disorders, breakdowns, and multiple suicide attempts. By her 20s, Judy's erratic behavior and missed performances made headlines. The public, enchanted by her vulnerability on screen, couldn't look away from her struggles. Her marriages unraveled, her finances crumbled, and her health spiraled. Garland's 1950 firing from MGM, once unthinkable, was a national scandal, signaling the collapse of a carefully constructed star image. Even as she staged comebacks with triumphant concerts and A Star is Born, the whispers of instability persisted. The most painful controversy played out in front of millions. Her final years were marked by a string of public breakdowns, failed relationships, and a dependence on pills she couldn't escape. When Judy died of an overdose at age 47, the world mourned, but Hollywood's complicity in her destruction was impossible to ignore. Judy Garland's controversies were never simply personal failings. They were a reflection of an industry willing to sacrifice its brightest lights for the promise of profit and spectacle. Her tragic journey remains a sobering reminder that even the most beloved icons can be brought low by forces beyond their control. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was the kind of actor who brought gravitas and sensitivity to every role. But off-screen, Tracy lived a double life that kept Hollywood's gossip columns humming for decades. Married to Louise Treadwell in the 1920s, Tracy never divorced her, yet for 26 years, he carried on a passionate and famously secret affair with Katharine Hepburn. Their relationship was Hollywood's worst-kept secret, with studio executives, directors, and co-stars all in on the truth, but sworn to silence by the unwritten rules of the era. Hepburn and Tracy's chemistry was undeniable, burning through 9 films together and endless nights spent at each other's side. But public acknowledgement was strictly forbidden. Tracy, a devout Catholic, refused to leave his wife, who cared for their deaf son. Hepburn, fiercely independent, accepted the arrangement, but the couple's quiet devotion became a scandal that everyone pretended not to see. Friends whispered about the lengths they went to conceal their love. Their love, secret entrances, private getaways, and coded messages. For decades, the couple maintained their complicated arrangement. Hepburn never married, and Tracy returned to his wife's side only on his deathbed in 1967. After Tracy's passing, Hepburn finally spoke openly about their love, revealing a story of sacrifice, secrecy, and loyalty that both defied and defined the Golden Age. The Tracy-Hepburn affair remains one of Hollywood's most enduring and controversial romances, a poignant reminder of how even legends are forced to live in the shadows when fame and taboo collide. Tallula Bankhead. Tallula Bankhead was never one to shy away from a headline or a scandal. Known for her razor wit, booming voice, and an appetite for excess, Bankhead scandalized polite society at every turn. In an era obsessed with appearances, she lived openly as a bisexual, flouting conventions about gender, sexuality, and substance use with gleeful defiance. Bankhead's outrageous public remarks on everything from her many lovers to her fondness for drink and drugs kept her in the crosshairs of Hollywood's morality police. Her parties were legendary for their wildness, featuring guests from the highest echelons of art, politics, and bohemia. She delighted in shocking guests, whether by discussing her affairs with both men and women, or by showing off her latest catch with mischievous pride. The press, naturally, couldn't get enough, chronicling her every move and innuendo. Studio bosses and censors lived in fear of her unpredictability, with some refusing to cast her in major roles simply because of her reputation. Yet, Bankhead never apologized. She considered herself above society's restrictions and relished her status as Hollywood's ultimate provocateur. Her notorious quote, "I'm as pure as the driven slush," became a kind of calling card, a warning that with Tallula, boundaries would be crossed and rules broken. Despite, or perhaps because of, her scandals, she remained beloved by fans who saw her as a symbol of true independence in a world of manufactured personas. Tallula Bankhead's life was a whirlwind of controversy, rebellion, and unapologetic freedom, cementing her place in Hollywood legend, not for what she hid, but for everything she dared to reveal. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor lived her life in the glare of the spotlight, but it was her scandalous affair with singer Eddie Fisher that cemented her status as Hollywood's reigning homewrecker. In the late 1950s, Taylor was mourning the death of her third husband, producer Mike Todd, when she found solace in the arms of Fisher, who happened to be married to America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds. The tabloids erupted. Headlines screamed betrayal and treachery, casting Taylor as the villain in a real-life soap opera. Public opinion was brutal. She was denounced in editorials and even shunned by former friends. But Taylor never tried to sugarcoat her actions. She famously declared, "You can't break up a happy marriage." When Fisher left Reynolds and married Taylor, the scandal seemed complete, except it was only the beginning. Their union was tumultuous, plagued by infidelity and resentment, and ended in a bitter divorce when Taylor met Richard Burton on the set of Cleopatra. That relationship, too, sparked headlines around the globe, especially as both were still married to other people at the time. Far from destroying her career, these scandals seemed to only increase Taylor's allure. She remained unapologetic, refusing to conform to society's expectations of how women should grieve, love, or move on. For a generation, Elizabeth Taylor's headline-making affairs symbolized the shifting morals of post-war America, the birth of tabloid culture, and a new era in which celebrities lived and loved without apology. The homewrecker label stuck, but Taylor turned controversy into legend, living and loving on her own terms. Jean Harlo. Jean Harlo, Hollywood's original platinum blonde, seemed to live under a spotlight that only grew more intense with scandal. But the most shocking moment of her life, and one that would haunt Hollywood's corridors of power, was the mysterious death of her husband, MGM executive Paul Byrne, in 1932. Just 2 months after their wedding, Byrne was found dead in their Beverly Hills home, a gun by his side and a note left behind. The official story, orchestrated by MGM's publicity machine, was suicide, allegedly due to impotence. Yet rumors quickly exploded. Was it really suicide, or was Harlo, the dazzling starlet, entangled in something darker? The whispers grew louder. Some suggested Byrne's ex-wife had killed him. Others implied Jean herself might be involved, or at least a witness to something so scandalous it needed burying. MGM executives scrambled to control the narrative, going so far as to allegedly tamper with evidence and stage the scene before police arrived. Their desperate attempt to shield Harlo and the studio from negative publicity became as notorious as death itself. For Harlo, the scandal was devastating. Although she was never accused of any wrongdoing, the event cast a long shadow over her remaining years, fueling tabloid headlines and persistent gossip. She threw herself into her work, making some of her most memorable films in the aftermath. Yet the sense of tragedy followed her, and she died just 5 years later, at 26, adding yet another layer of legend to her brief, tempestuous life. The Paul Byrne mystery remains unsolved, a classic case of Golden Age Hollywood's willingness to do anything to protect its stars and its secrets. William Holden. William Holden was known for his rugged good looks, on-screen intensity, and off-screen charm. But beneath the smooth exterior lay a darkness that few in Hollywood dared to discuss openly. The most controversial episode in Holden's life wasn't a headline-grabbing trial or a studio-orchestrated scandal. It was the whispered story of his alleged involvement in a fatal hit-and-run accident. In the late 1950s, rumors swirled that Holden had struck Jess Barker, the ex-husband of actress Susan Hayward, with his car and fled the scene. Although Holden was never charged or formally linked to the accident, the story persisted in industry circles. The lack of public prosecution didn't mean the controversy faded. Holden's increasingly erratic behavior, fueled by heavy drinking, did little to quell the rumors. Friends spoke in hushed tones about the guilt that seemed to shadow him, pointing to his troubled personal life as evidence of a man haunted by something he couldn't confess. Hollywood, always eager to protect its own, closed ranks, and the story never reached the mainstream press with full force. Still, the whispers dogged Holden for the rest of his life. When he died in 1981 after a fall at home, reportedly too intoxicated to call for help, the sense of unfinished business and hidden darkness surrounded his memory. The hit-and-run incident, never fully proven or disproven, remains a cautionary footnote in Hollywood's history, a reminder that some scandals are kept alive not by headlines, but by the secrets everyone suspects and no one can prove. For William Holden, it became an invisible weight, coloring every triumph with a touch of tragedy. Loretta Young. Loretta Young's career sparkled with wholesome roles and a reputation for devout Catholicism. But behind the scenes lay a secret that would only emerge in full decades after her death. In 1935, Young became pregnant with Clark Gable's child while filming The Call of the Wild. At the time, Gable was married, and Hollywood's morality clauses and public expectations left no room for such scandal. Rather than risk her career, Young orchestrated one of the most elaborate cover-ups in Hollywood history. She disappeared from the spotlight, gave birth in secret, and then arranged for her own baby to be adopted years later, reintroducing her as an orphan child in need of a loving home. For decades, the truth was hidden in plain sight. Those close to Young whispered about the real parentage of her daughter, Judy Lewis, but the public image remained untarnished. Young's adherence to Catholic values only deepened the irony and pain, both for herself and her daughter, who grew up never knowing her real father. It wasn't until Judy Lewis's memoir in the 1990s that the full story became public, confirming one of Hollywood's longest-running open secrets. The revelation added new complexity to Young's legacy. Admirers saw her as a victim of an unforgiving era, forced to choose between career and honesty. Critics, however, pointed to the lifelong consequences for her daughter. The controversy endures as a powerful example of how Golden Age Hollywood manipulated reality, using secrecy and image management to protect stars at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing the truth. Loretta Young's story is a poignant reminder of the price celebrities have paid to maintain their carefully crafted illusions. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was never content to merely perform for the camera. She lived for controversy, challenging every boundary imposed by society, politics, and Hollywood itself. Born in Germany, Dietrich shot to American stardom with her cool allure and androgynous style, soon scandalizing both sides of the Atlantic. Her most controversial moment came during World War II, when she publicly and passionately denounced the Nazis, risking her life and reputation by performing for Allied troops and urging fellow Germans to resist Hitler. Her actions made her a hero to many, but a traitor to others. She was blacklisted in Germany and lived under threat, yet never flinched. Dietrich's private life was equally headline-making. She openly defied gender norms, wearing men's suits and seducing lovers of both sexes with little regard for what the press or public might think. Her affairs with luminaries like Gary Cooper, Mercedes d'Acosta, and Jean Gabin were widely rumored, but Dietrich refused to either confirm or deny, reveling in the mystique. Her bold choices were both scandal and inspiration. She faced criticism from conservatives, censors, and even former friends, but her independence only made her more magnetic. In many ways, Dietrich's entire life was a controversy, a running battle against conformity, fascism, and the limitations placed on women. By the time she retired, her legend was built not just on cinematic glamour, but on the courage to provoke, resist, and love without apology. Marlene Dietrich's story is a testament to the power of controversy, not just to shock, but to change the world. The legends of old Hollywood remind us that beneath the glamour, controversy was never far behind. Each of these stars broke the rules, rewrote the script, or paid the price for living on their own terms. Their scandals shocked the world, but they also challenged boundaries and forced us to see fame and humanity in a new light. Which story struck you most? Let us know below, and don't forget, the next Hollywood secret is always waiting in the shadows, just out of sight.